everybody. Very happy to be live a little bit later than planned with Luca. Do you want to start us off with an introduction to yourself and your books?
So I am Luca Veste, and I've written 8 novels. The latest being "You Never Said Goodbye." The first 7 were a mix of police procedural and thrillers set in and around Liverpool. "You Never Said Goodbye" is a bit of a departure, which is much more of an action thriller that kind of takes place both in the UK and in America.
Good description.
It almost sounded rehearsed.
Is this a thing that you authors? I've seen post Harrogate people saying that they had to practice at elevator pitch. Is this a thing that you
Yeah.
kind of memorize, like your introductions to your books?
Well, I mean, I don't think I've ever memorized anything. And every time I've done something like this, I've always said something completely different, which is But I think if you do enough, I mean, I've done so many things. You get more comfortable with making things up as you go along, because that's literally the job anyway. So
That's what I always tell everyone that teaching is.
Yeah.
It's like 50% pretending you know what you're doing and 50% making it up as you go along.
Yeah, I mean, they're always my favorite reviews. Not that I read many reviews now because they just make me cry. But one of my favorite reviews I ever got was a 1-star review where they said that it felt like the author was making it up as they went along. And I was like, that's literally what we do. That's literally like, we don't. I like this idea that, like, these books come fully formed to us, and that would be great because I'd get 14, 15 books a year done that way. But no, we are just probably just 99% of us are just making it up as we go along and hoping for the best every single time, because it's 400 pages, and you kind of hope that, like, every time it's you're worried that you've forgotten how to do it, and you just hope for the best. But it's working every time for me at the moment. But there is that moment of panic where it's like, I don't know where I'm going, but I'm just going to keep typing and hope for the best. The characters are there, the plot is it's near enough there, and you just hope that it comes out from your imagination and comes out.
It seems to be working.
Well, it's done all right so far. I'm still petrified of that kind of tap on the shoulder, where they go like, "Listen, we made a mistake. We meant it different, Luca. And like that. It wasn't you, but thanks very much for just keeping quiet for now, and just go back off into the sunset, like the end of an Incredible Hulk, where the guy would just walk off, like the music would play. That's what I fear every single time."
So we've timed it perfectly. Apparently, some kind of football match has been on.
Yes. and I've literally just been watching it. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? Because, like, it's one of those where I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it, and I love the fact that it's women who are going to be the ones that won it first rather than men, because it's just hilarious, because they get paid so little in comparison that, yeah, it's kind of a thumb in the eye, isn't it, to the overpaid prima donnas that kind of ruin men's football a lot of the time. Although I enjoyed Liverpool yesterday because I'm a massive Liverpool fan and they won the Community Shield. So it's been a good weekend for a football fan.
I generally never watch football.
Yeah. So you didn't even watch the Lionesses, no? No. I mean, if you don't like football, I mean, it's not. I mean, you're in the minority, but I mean, it's. But no, I love all sports. You see, I'll watch anything competitive, and I've always been that way. I mean, I was, like I played every sport going when I was a kid. But yeah, I can't stop. I'll watch anything. Like, my family will go mad at me for watching all kinds of. I'll be sitting there watching, like, Crown Green Bowls, and they're like, "This is the most boring thing ever." And it's like, yeah, but if you keep watching it, there'll be like some kind of drama will happen, and it never does because it's bowls. But I'll watch anything, darts. I've snooker, any of those, anything competitive. I love anything competitive. So yeah, so I'm Yeah, I was well into the Lionesses. I'm well happy about that. I actually used to play with an ex-England forward who used to play for the England women's team, Jodie Taylor. And we used to play football with her when I was about 14. And she was a girlfriend of my brother, and she used to run rings around us then. So I know the level that they're playing at is massively higher than any kind of amateur boys kind of thing in this country. So anytime I see any abuse online, I'm like, you haven't got no idea what level they're playing at. They run rings around you. But no, I love it. That's like my not a guilty pleasure, but that's what I do in my spare time is I watch any sport. But I understand there's a ton of people out there who hate any kind of sports, just not interested in it whatsoever, would rather just curl up with a good book and a nice cup of cocoa and ignore anything of that nature going on.
My dad will watch any sport.
Yeah.
I will watch some. I'm more pro rugby and things than football.
Rugby. Do you know what? Rugby is the only one really that I will watch it, but it's one of the ones that I prefer. I prefer, and this is a terrible thing to say as a northerner. I prefer to watch American football than rugby, which is just strange. Rugby just seems to me it's just like let's go like a bunch of fellas on the pitch and then just watch them crash into each other over and over again. And like you see the cauliflower ears and like the noses that look a bit like mine because mine's bent over there like that way. But yeah, I don't understand. But American football, I adore because it's so technical. Like people will watch that and think like, well, they keep stopping every 5 seconds. It's like, no, it's very tactical, and they have to be very clever. And it's like they've got all the little plays on there. Like I love anything like that when it takes a bit of effort. But I don't tend to admit that very often because people get annoyed with you when you say you like American football more than rugby, especially in the Northwest. St. Helens is only over there.
Yeah, well, I Yorkshire family, so
yeah.
Same thing. Anyway, we got distracted. Tell us a little bit about the newest book.
So You Never Said Goodbye is about a guy called Sam Cooper who's in his mid-30s. When we join him, he's in a very early fledgling relationship. Everything seems to be going really well with his life. And then he gets a phone call to say that his dad has been taken into hospital and he has to go back. He hasn't seen his dad in almost 20 years because when he was 10, 11 years old, his mother died. And it kind of destroyed the relationship that he had with his father. And he basically, as soon as he could get out of the house, he left. When he gets there, his dad, he realizes, has been beaten up and is very near death. And his last words that his dad says to him is, "Your mum is still alive." And what he thinks is, just the dying words of someone who's kind of, lost a little bit of his mind. When other people start looking for his mum as well, he realizes that there's maybe more truth to that than with any first thoughts, which leads him onto a quest to find out what the truth is about what happened 25 years ago. His mum is American, so that leads him to go to the East Coast of America to find out what happened to her.
It's quite a departure from sort of your previous books. What made you sort of go?
So this story has been it's been in mind for a long time. It's very much based on something that happened in my actual life. When I was 8 years old, my mum left home on a Friday, 2 days before Mother's Day, and she was supposed to come back on the Mother's Day, and she didn't, and we didn't see her for months. Her and my dad had basically split up, and it wasn't a nice breakup. Me and my brother and sister stayed with my dad, and we didn't see her for months. So I've always wondered if she'd never come back, how would that, how would they have dealt with that? Because my dad was struggling massively with the whole breakup and that, so we wouldn't really talk about it. I was 8. I had like a 5-year-old brother, a 2-year-old sister who they don't remember it at all, but I remember every moment of it. And it's one of those things where it's that kind of thing can affect you just in as you're growing up, and that fear of abandonment comes across in a lot of my work anyway. But this story, so that story of like, what would I have done if my mum would never have come back? That's been on in my list of ideas since I became a writer. about that kind of story about someone trying to find out the truth about what happened to his mother. So when it came to a change publisher with this book, and we came to discussing what I was going to write, I decided that I wanted to try something different. I have stuck with the same setting for so long that there's only so many serial killers that could be in Liverpool at any one time. I thought I wanted to try something different. So the first thing I did was I thought I'm going to set something that's outside of Liverpool, and then it became, well, the kind of story I want to tell with this, which is very much like a fast-paced action thriller, I felt lent itself easier to an American setting. What I didn't want to do though was write a book that I didn't know the setting whatsoever. So a couple of years ago, I went to the small town in Connecticut, which is where the book is set, and I went there on a research trip. I was there for a while, and I went through everything, like drank in as much of the setting as possible. So there was an authenticity to it, because that if it had set it in New York, you can kind of get away with a lot of things because people have their own perception of New York anyway, and it is so recognizable that you don't really need to. But I didn't want to do something like I wanted it to be in a very kind of constrained setting in a small town. So I picked a town on an Amtrak from Boston that I could get to, and I went. Unfortunately, it was about a week and a half before the first lockdown started in March 2020. So the headline on the paper, the last day I was there in Connecticut, and on the day, it's called the paper there, was first case confirmed in state. So I'm always wondering if I was patient zero for Connecticut, but I'm not entirely certain of that. I don't know. I don't like to claim responsibility for things that I may not be responsible for. But it was so that kind of like I did all that, and I did plan to go back and look at other places and things like that. But I'm glad in a way that I didn't, because I wrote the book during the pandemic and stuff like that, and it kind of did constrain me to just use that setting and use those surrounding towns. So it was even more claustrophobic as a read, because you are just in that kind of little space. But yeah, it is a departure, because I kind of became known for writing the Murphy and Rossi series of books, which was 4 books set in Liverpool, and then I wrote a series of standalones that were all set in Liverpool as well. And it's a great setting, and I really truly believe that setting is absolutely important. It's another character in a novel, and Liverpool, I think I brought to life over 7 books, but it's a very small city in relation to something like it's about the same size as the town in America that I went to. It's not that big, and it can become that. There's always that fear of like, am I just turning Liverpool into Midsummer Murders? Where it's like it gets a bit silly that this kind of thing can keep happening. So I wanted to try and test myself as a writer, and I feel like I did, and I feel like I wrote my best book under those circumstances, and I absolutely love the process of writing the book. I also had that foot in both camps, because the main character is British, so he was an English guy who was kind of thrown into this this setting where he has no idea what's going on, and it's so different to what he's used to, which is exactly what I experienced going over there. That I felt like it was a real departure, and I'm glad I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did it.
What's the reception been like to it? Because it's not been out long, has it?
So the hardback came out in February, and then the paperback came out in July. The reception I've had so far, I mean, it's been overwhelmingly positive, which is really good. I'm so glad I waited until this book to write something like this, because I don't feel I could have done this in at an earlier point in my career. Because this is much more of a Harlan Coben, Linwood Barclay type of thriller, which is those are the kind of books that I really, really love. But I never thought I'd have the opportunity to write. So because I've waited this long to do it, I feel I've really got the nuances of those kind of fast-paced page-turning thrillers on point, which is great. And I'm really appreciative of the kind of feedback that I've got, because there was that worry when the book came out that people would go, "Who do you think you are?" It's like, the Fat Scouser can't do this kind of book. And it's like, I was like, thank God, like this has gone really well. And I mean, I'm contracted for two more books. They're going to be very much similar in this style. Um, it's fun to write. They are so much fun to write. The most difficult thing I find as a writer is you can bore yourself, and which if you're boring yourself, you're boring the reader. And if you are just kind of, oh no, I need to stick in my lane, I need to stick to what I know I can get away with, then you're not pushing yourself as a writer. You're not getting better, and you're not testing yourself. You're then not entertaining the reader, which is exactly what we're there for. We're there to keep people turning the page while Netflix is blaring from a telly in the corner, just saying, come on, watch us. It's much easier. You can just turn over if you don't like it and watch something else. We've got to keep you locked in place. And that's a real pressure to have. So writing this kind of book where I'm enjoying it, where I know that I'm doing, my best work, that I hope then can relate to a reader who's going, I'm enjoying this as well. So I've had numerous people coming out to saying like, this is your best book, this is your best book, which is absolutely overwhelmingly great to hear, because that's what keeps you going in the morning. That's what keeps you writing the next book. That's what keeps you going. And it's the best job in the world. So and that's the best bit of it, is hearing from people who read your books and enjoy them.
So will your next two also have a bit of an international flavour?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, the next one definitely will. I think the ideas that I'm having at the moment do lend themselves better to that kind of setting. The one after that will not be. I know I've written the second one you see in that contract, and that is, partly set in America again. But the third one in this contract will not be set in America. That's a different story. That's a very different setting. I like the idea of just being able to bounce around and doing what I like. That's the best. That's just it's an amazing ability to be able to do that. There are so many great UK authors that I don't feel the obligation to oh, I've got to do it. I've got to keep up with it. There's great just in Liverpool that are fantastic authors, so don't feel I need to represent those areas and say like, oh, I'm like I'm turning me back on where I'm from. I'm not doing that. I'm just telling the stories that I want to tell. And if it happens to be set in America, it happens to be set there. The next one, the third one in the contract, will not be set there, but that's just because the story doesn't lend itself for that setting. So that's why it's not set in there. But yeah, I'm just enjoying what I'm writing, and the freedom that I have to do that is something that I can't begin to describe as a feeling. It's just brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant to have that freedom to do that.
What kind of research do you have to do when you're going sort of for a thriller? Do you have to go like looking into guns and
Yeah, I mean, there's. I think we all know now that how a gun, if you, the mechanics are very, you point to something, you squeeze the trigger, and it'll go off, and invariably someone's going to get hit with a bullet or probably kill them. But in a thriller, you can get away with a little bit where it's like, oh, I get hit in the shoulder, so I can just run that off. It's fine. It's like that. But with the research I did for this, it's much more about. It was about the place where I was setting it. It was about that kind of, I went and just immersed myself in that town, and spoke to hundreds, I reckon, people over the course of that time I was there. Because I'm a very outgoing person anyway, so I think that helped a lot. So I was just, and Americans, especially on where I was, are very happy to speak to you about anything. They'll if you just strike up a conversation, they're quite happy to tell you, mainly because they hear my accent and either think I'm French, or because for some reason the Scouse accent sounds like a French accent, or just something exotic. So they're interested. They want to know about you as well. So I just went to every shop. I went in and just started asking questions. I found a bar, went in there, and was just going along the bar and talking to different people. I was just talking to as many people, finding out about, well, what kind of people live here. So what happens is, any stories you can tell me about what might have happened. And all of these things can happen, can feed their way into the story. A lot of it gets taken out during edits because they're boring. You know, you don't need to read 3 pages about, you know, a certain house on the top of a hill and why it's there. So they can kind of, but it helps as a writer to know those things as you're writing, because it helps to, you know, immerse yourself in that setting. But with the thriller, the gun thing, I you know, I don't tend to worry too much about that kind of thing, because that's not what the story's about. The story isn't about, you know, what kind of gun and what color it is and how it recoils and how it, you know, that's not what the story is about for me. The story is about character, and the characters in the book are very much based on people that I met on my travels. You know, like those kind of people. The baddies, not so much. Isn't really woman to any of them, but like, yeah, I mean, it's much more about character than you know, the actual mechanics of it, because I think we all know now by now, like, you know, we've read enough Reacher to know those kind of details. And that's basically what I did. I read a lot of Reacher, but I've been doing that for the last 20 years, so that's not a big deal for me. But it was yeah, it was the same kind of research I do for every book. It's about character for me, always about character, and that's where I think, you know, the story is kind of either lives or dies is on character. And that's what I spend most of my time on, is developing characters and making sure they feel as authentic as possible.
I'm going to shock you here along with the football thing. I've never read a Reach book.
We've never read a Reacher book. Do you know what? It's weird that, because I was speaking to someone last week at Harrogate who hadn't read one either. It's one of those where, like, I read a like a fact once where a Reacher book is sold every 7 seconds somewhere in the world. When it's one of those facts where you hear it and go, God, and then you start thinking about it, and go, how does that? Every 7 seconds, it's like what, 8 or 9 a minute, which translates to what, 60 times 8 is 480. So, I mean, there's a lot of books there, so there must be a lot of readers. But you know, there's also a ton of people who haven't read. I haven't read any. I've read one Agatha Christie novel, which is ridiculous. You know, when you speak, you know, when you go to these like crime writing conventions like we were at last week, where Agatha Christie is like, that's where the hotel was where she was, you know, she went missing. It's like she's a massive cornerstone of the genre, and it wasn't for me. I can see why people love her, and I can see why she's, you know, the original queen of crime. Um, but there's so many books out there. Why why limit yourself to be forced to read anything? I would say that, you know, Reacher is fantastic, and I would recommend reading it. But if I'm sure you've got a to be read pile that would shame all of us, you know, and I know it because mine is, and you know, it's one of those where it's like there's always another book that you'd want to read first, and go with that book, because as long as you're reading something, that's the main thing. Never be shamed by. I remember. Do you remember when the whole 50 Shades of Grey thing was happening, and there was a lot of people online who were saying like, "Oh, this is terrible. This is the end of like civilization as we know it." And all I could think of was there's a whole bunch of people here reading who would never read again, or may never have read in the first place. Anything like one of my brother-in-law constantly apologizes for not reading my books. And I say, yeah, but are you reading anything? She goes, oh, yeah, so I've read this, which is like, you know, some footballer's biography. Or I read this, you know, like Bear Grylls thing and all that. I was like, well, don't worry about it. You're reading something. You know, that's enough for me. I'm happy someone, you know, and as long as the reader's still there, I've still got a job. That's literally it. So whatever you want to read is fine by me.
I'm 100% down with that. I'm a believer
Mm.
that if you're reading, that's all that matters.
I mean, like that's where I come from. You know, like I grew up on like the worst estates on Merseyside, like, you know, just like where the, you know, mortality rate is like 20 years lower than the rest of the country, you know, where the employment rate is 20 times higher than the rest of the country. So the only thing that was kind of a distraction for that was reading. I remember, you know, the I was lucky, so lucky now because it's gone now, but there was a library right in the middle of the council estate, and I remember discovering this place where you could take out free entertainments and you didn't have to pay for it. You know, we came from a house where we had one of those tellies which you had to rent, which came with a little box, and you put a pound in it, and you got 8 hours. And I remember, like, you couldn't watch the telly during the day, because if you watched the telly during the day, then, like, mum and dad couldn't watch it at night. So you would get you could have half an hour of kids' TV, and that was it. So, like, to get you to watch anything, to have any kind of entertainment, it was either playing sport outside, or in the evening I would go, right, I want to read. And I found, this series of books that I could read, and I read all the Enid Blyton and all that type of thing. The Mallory Towers was my particular favourite, mainly because I didn't understand what boarding schools were, because I'd never had any concept of what a boarding school was. I thought they were made up for a long time. It was just this place where you could have, like, midnight feasts. It was amazing. And I went through all the, and then I went on to Stephen King when I was far too young. And I just remember, like, this place where I would go out and get tons of books. So growing up, reading was like a massive part of my life. But writing wasn't at all. I didn't have any aspirations to be a writer. I didn't have any kind of idea that I could be a writer. But reading was always there. And that's, like, that's still the case now. It's still my favorite hobby. It's still my favorite thing to do, is to find a great book, and once you start, you can't put it down. That's heaven to me. That's heaven.
So, did you you obviously never imagined that your writing career would take you to places like Glastonbury then either?
No. So when I was growing up, I'd say, like, I've always say, like, I basically failed at everything I wanted to do when I was growing up. I wanted to be a footballer, failed at that. I wanted to be a boxer, failed at that. I wanted to be an actor, failed at that. I wanted to be a singer, failed at that. I wanted to be in theatre, failed at that. I was in various bands for years and years and years, gigging in the worst places in Liverpool you could imagine. Failed at spectacular that. Got into my 20s. I was working a dead end job, and got made redundant. And that was when my wife said to me, "You should have gone to university." And I was like, "People like me didn't go to university. People who didn't do well at school and anything like that, we didn't go to university." But she was like, "No, you could do it. You could do it." So I went and did an access course at the University of Liverpool, and I came top in that class. And I don't know how, but I obviously had something in me. So I went and did psychology and criminology, which led to me then being a writer, because at that point I was reviewing books online, and I was one of the very few bloggers who were doing it in 2011. There was Nowadays there's hundreds. Back then there was like three of us, and one of them I'm pretty certain was not a real person. We were really early kind of bloggers doing crime fiction, um, and it was only by accident that I started writing short stories, um, and then discovered this career as a writer. And I was like, great, this is what I've been waiting for my whole life. I've done a load of series of dead end jobs. I had a job for a while, then got made redundant out of that. My degree was in psychology and criminology, and I was kind of looking at what I was going to do at the end of that. And I was like, it's still not what I love to do. Found writing. I was like, great, this is it. And I thought everything else was behind me. In the space of time that I've been a writer, I have played football again for the first time in years. I started playing football again for the England crime writers team up in bloody Scotland. And then in 2017, Mark Billingham and I are doing an event in Liverpool. And in the pub afterwards, he says to me, "Can you play bass or drums?" And I'd played guitar for 20 years. And I thought, well, bass is a kind of a guitar. So I said, yeah, I can play bass. I couldn't, but I've learned anything. If I've learned anything in this life, is that if someone says, "Can you do this?" Invariably I'll say, "Yeah, of course I can." He says, "Great. We're putting a crime writing band together. A bunch of crime writers are going to put a band together." And I was like, "That sounds equal parts amazing and awful. I'm in." So we all convene. We're going to play the Edinburgh International Book Festival, and it's myself, Mark Billingham, as I said, Chris Brookmeyer, Stuart Neville, Doug Johnson, and Val McDermott, who at this point I had been writing for 5 years, going to Harrogate every year, and I'd never shared a word with her because I was so intimidated by her, because she is just the queen of crime. And I was like, this is fantastic. We all convened, and I knew within 5 minutes that this was going to work. So we became the fun-loving crime writers, and I thought, great, we'll have a gig like this, and it'll be a great laugh, and we'll never do it again. And 5 years later, we have been on tour in Canada. We've played Iceland. We've done every kind of festival you can find in Scotland and England. We've played in Northern Ireland. And yes, in 2019, we played Glastonbury, which is still the greatest day of my life. Because basically we get on stage and I'm like, this is totally normal. This is what I've been waiting for 25 years to do. And it's with friends rather than annoying people I was in bands with 20 years ago who, would invariably show up late or would book us into venues that were terrible. And yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. And yeah, so we're playing next week at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival at the same theatre where, stand-up comedians are playing and stuff like that. Like Stuart Lee is on, I think, just before us. Ridiculous things like that, but it's so much fun. And we know it's fun. We know we're there for a party. We don't take ourselves seriously. We're never going to write our own music. We play a variety of covers that all have something to do with crime, and we'll give you a cracking night, and you'll have a dance, and you'll go away smiling, and so do we, because we enjoy it so much.
That's amazing. I'm just listening to it's so inspiring to listen to you and like your roots.
Oh, thank you.
Just because I know I was speaking at a conference recently. I teach. I was speaking at a conference recently about the importance of kind of encouraging people to take different routes, and I didn't get many GCSEs the first time
No.
around.
Do you know what?
My route to uni
something
was a bit different and things as well.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, especially like from an area where I'm from, like where all the lads that I grew up with are they're even in jobs they hate, or they've been in prison and they're now struggling to kind of come back into, or they're just they've got families and they're in support. I am incredibly lucky that I found something like this. I am incredibly lucky. So I spend 90% of my time, especially at events and stuff like that, just saying, like, if you have a dream, go for it. If you feel like there's something that you're like, I want to have a go at that, but I'm not entirely sure if I've got the talent or the dedication or anything like that to do it. Listen, I come from somewhere where like this shouldn't happen to someone like me. And like most of my family is still living in they're still living in Speke in Liverpool, just by the airport, where I've lost family members over the last couple of years in their 60s. They shouldn't be dying at that age, but that's what happens around here, is that that's a good age for some reason. Life's too short to be worrying about I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm good enough for this. Everyone's got it within them to do whatever they want. You are only limited by your own sense of kind of I don't know if I can do this, their own worries, their own anxieties about things. I am constantly a ball of anxiety every time a book comes out. I said it earlier, of that tap on the shoulder, but I need to keep going because I know there are people who are reading me every single time I bring a book out. I know that this is the best job that I've ever had, and I can't think of anything better that I want to spend my time doing. The writing part is the best. The talking about it like this is the best. Meeting people at conventions is the best. Everything. There is small parts of this job which aren't fun. There are small parts, but they are completely outweighed with how good it is. So because I have the opportunity to do that, because I had the opportunity and the luck to be able to do that, I implore people to do the same. And it doesn't have to be writing. It could just be about, I became a blogger with absolutely no kind of connection to the writing world whatsoever. Back in 2011, there was no kind of community. There was a very disparate, kind of few over here, few over there, and that was it. And I just decided one day I wanted to give something back. And I just did it. I got a WordPress and I did it. And no one was reading me at the beginning. No one was reading my reviews, but I kept going because that's just what I felt like I wanted to do. And it can be anything in this world. And you're only lying to yourself. You're only hating yourself by not just taking a chance and going for something. And if it doesn't come off, it doesn't matter. Nothing happened. You're still alive. You're still going, unless, like, your passion is base jumping, in which case jumping off a building and your parachute fall. That might be an issue. But, like, for this kind of thing, anything creative, you're only being held back by your own kind of worries and your own anxieties. But the world will still get, will keep spinning. You are not going to be destroyed by anything, that can happen creatively. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If you want to try something else, you wrote a crime novel and it didn't come out and people didn't really like it. Well, is there another genre you want to have a go at? Do you like horror better? Try horror. No one liked my horror book. No one wants to publish it. But you know what? I've got a great idea for a romantic comedy. Go and do that instead. You're only limited by your own imagination, and that's the thing for me, is that, like, I there's some people that I've heard where it's like, there's not enough space. There's so much space for every kind of voice, and I want to hear them all. I'd learn more. I was talking earlier about Enid Blyton. I learned about boarding schools as a 10-year-old, 9 or 10-year-old, on a counsellor who had no concept of boarding schools. I learned from that because I want to hear those voices. I want to hear those experiences. The best books I'm reading at the moment are all, those kind of things where I have no concept of where those people come from, because I didn't live it, but I'm learning through them. And everyone is the same. We all have different life. We all have different upbringings. We all have different lives. We've all got individual voices. We've all got a unique voice. That's just the glory of what we're doing here. Is like what we're talking about, what creativity is. I love it when people say to me, I'm starting to write. It's something I don't know about it, and I'm going, no, it's great, keep going. Because the hardest thing is to finish it, because you are only being stopped by yourself. That's the hardest bit. When I was writing my first book, I could have given up at any moment and thinking, what am I doing? I was in the middle of doing a degree. That's where I should have been spending my time. But I didn't stop, and that's what separates people, is like the people who stop and the people who keep going. And that's why I always want people to keep going. That's a long answer to what was probably not even a question.
That's a really good answer, though. What have you so you're a big reader. What have you read recently? What have been your reads of the year?
Oh, reads of the year is a difficult one. I read 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard, which was a book that I was absolutely convinced that I wouldn't like, because it's a thriller that's set during the pandemic, and I didn't think I wanted to read anything that was, kind of a reminder of that. That was absolutely fantastic, because it just became this insidious thing that kind of run underneath. It didn't. You kind of just separated it from that to that, and I love Catherine's writing. I think she's brilliant. I also I'm just reading now. You can actually see it over my shoulder there. It's Val McDermott's new one, 1989. This is a new Ali Burns series that she started. I read 1979 earlier this year, and I absolutely adored it. It's really annoying in a way, because she's been going for 30 odd years, and she's then starts a new series, and you're like, Jesus, this is the best she's written for years. How does she do this? But there's also, C.L. Taylor, The Guilty Couple. I absolutely love that book. Absolutely love that book. There's tons of books. It's so difficult to remember them all. But yeah, there's not been really a bad book I've read this year. There's not really been a bad book I've read this year.
No, I don't know that I have read anything that I've really disliked.
I mean, that's another thing that comes in, the pressure type of thing as a writer, is that the level that people are producing at the moment is just unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. As I'm saying, like Val, 30 odd years in the business. She could sit there and write Tony Hill and Carol Jordan for the rest of her days, and people would be happy. But I know she wouldn't be. So she goes, you know what? I'm going to start a completely new series with a completely different character, and I'm going to rip so much from my own past and put it into this book, and create this series that will take place every 10 years, 1979, 1989, blah, blah, blah. And to do that is just so admirable. It's just, and that's when you go, like, you're my hero, because, like, you show them what you can do. And that's what I was saying before about pushing yourself as a writer. The only, like you could sit there and you can get lazy and kind of go, I know what my readers want, and I'm just going to keep giving them to the same every time. But that's not satisfying to me. That's not, and I know it's not satisfying to 99.9% of writers out there, from those who are self-published and small presses who are producing great work to those who have got 30-odd-year careers. That's everyone has got the same kind of thing where it's, I'm doing the best, absolute best. I'm writing the best book that I can every single time, and readers notice that. And I think, the level at the moment is better than I've ever experienced in the last 10, 20 years.
I'm quite enjoying looking at your shelves and discovering the inner like nerds behind you. Like there's the Martian, like a Ghostbusters car.
So that's the Ghostbusters car there. That's the Beatles. These are great. I found these last week. So this is the Sgt. Pepper's fridge magnets, but I'm keeping them in the thing. But I've got basically everything on my shelves. There's all kinds of little things. Look, there's book mugs there. There's little glasses there. There's all kinds. But the most important thing is obviously the books. But I collect things, and I've got to put them somewhere. So I use my shelves to do that.
It's good you got R2D2 behind you as well.
Yeah, that's a little Hoover. Apparently, I've never used it. It's supposed to like Hoover your desk for you. But I've never used it, so I don't know if it actually works. But so that just went on the shelf. There's a little American football up there. Where are we? That's a little Saints American. New Orleans Saints is my American football team. There's that up there. There's like a little guitar lunchbox. There's tons of stuff. There's tons of stuff. Oh yeah, there's a little duck, detective duck.
Very good. That's the sort of thing you'd expect a crime writer to have, though, right?
Yeah, I've got one thing.
You got a few people here saying that they agree with you. So Leslie thinks character is king. Laura says that your book sounds really interesting. She's only read one of yours so far, Dead Gone on audio, and it was very good, as was the narrator.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I've always wondered what people. I'm assuming that Laura is outside of Liverpool, because one of the things that I remember about the narrator on that, and I think he did the first 4 or 5 books, was that his Scouse accent did not sound right to anyone who came from Liverpool, but to anyone outside Liverpool, dead on. It was fine. So I've always wondered what wonder why that was. But like, audiobooks are interesting. I got the opportunity to ask for someone to narrate a book of one of my audiobooks once, and that was I think it was The Six, which I asked Neil Fitzmaurice, who's an actor that people may remember from Phoenix Nights. He played Ravon in that. He's also in The Office, the UK Office. He's the guy that David Brent hires at the beginning and then fires at the end of the series. And he's a Scouse actor who I've loved for years and years and years. So I asked him. I had the opportunity to get him to do The Six, and that's the only audiobook of mine that I've listened to. Because I can't. By the time you've got to that point, I'm already working on the next book, and I can't reread it. I can't because then you're like, oh no, I need to change everything. It's that kind of thing. But it's a weird kind of different thing. I do both though. I do listen to audiobooks more than I've ever done before. But yeah, I mean, I'm always interested in people who just how are they. I'm wondering if that you are getting a different experience reading the page of the print rather than reading through the audiobook. And I've always wondered how different the readers who kind of experience my audiobooks are to those who read them in print. I'll have to do a poll.
I cannot listen to audiobooks.
Really?
No, I'm too much of a fidget. So I'd just wander off like halfway or start doing something else and get distracted.
I mean, that's another thing, isn't it? It's like it is incredibly easy to be distracted when you're listening rather than reading. I know, like, my mind will wander, but I find them great if I'm going walking somewhere, or if any kind of housework, which I do a lot of, because for some reason there's always housework to be done. I don't know who's making this mess in my house, but if I find out who it is, but yeah, I do like to stick a book on and stuff like that. But I do think I'm experiencing the read very differently. But it's good. It's cool. I like it.
And so you said you chose the person for the sixth one. Did you ever say in any of the other narrators, or?
What usually tends to happen is you get a choice of, like, here's a couple or two or three different actors, and you can kind of, who do you feel is best, and then you find out when it's listed on Audible who got the job. I very much pushed for Neil Fitzmaurice to do that one, because it was just, the six was very much about a period in my life which he kind of didn't know about, but was part of, because that's when, like, I was, Phoenix Nights came out, and it was like, and The Office was out around that time, and that's the kind of thing I loved. I prefer The American Office now, like most normal people, but that's why I was like, that's the voice I heard in my head, so I wanted that one. But for a lot of the times, it's something that I kind of let people who've got much more experience than me kind of decide, and I'll listen to a couple of actors and I'll go, that one sounds great. It always comes down to accent. That's what it comes down to. Like the latest one, they sent me 2 or 3 voice actors, and I said, this one has got the best American accent. For the characters who are American, they've got the best one, and that's who I'd kind of hope you'd go for. So I'm like, I'm happy to go along with whatever the experts say.
Laura says that she's originally from Northern Ireland. And she doesn't.
So she'll know who Inspector Mallard is, because I bet she listens to the podcast. Yeah, that book detective is Inspector Mallard.
Yeah, she commented that further up, and she says she's originally from. She doesn't think it. Oh, she says she doesn't think it's just Scousers who complain about the accent being bad. Any drama home, they're complaining how rubbish it is.
It's one of those, isn't it, where to people, I'd say in Liverpool, we can differentiate the accents between different parts of Liverpool. So I know that I don't sound like Jamie Carragher, but like everyone that I meet outside of Liverpool thinks that I sound exactly like Jamie Carragher. And I'm like, no, he's from North Liverpool. My accent's from South Liverpool. We got totally different ones. So we can pick out the nuances of just that. Whereas outside, it all just sounds the same. I do the same thing. I think everyone south of Nottingham all sound the same. Especially on the east side of the country. I couldn't differentiate an Essex accent to a Surrey accent whatsoever. It all just sounds the same. So I imagine it's like, there is a generic accent that you would just assume would be related to that area, and you go, that's fine with me. There are people who do fantastic Scouse accents. Martin Freeman being one of them, in the amazing BBC drama The Responder, which is written by a friend of mine, Tony Schumacher. He got it absolutely dead on. And I've not seen that for a long, long time. But I reckon that was Tony's influence, just going like, no, you got it wrong, mate. You need to.
Has there been any TV interest in any of yours?
Look, I mean, like, everything, you always hope, and like, I've had options, I've had meetings, I've got very, very close a few times. It is incredibly difficult to get anything on television, because the levels which you have to go through of this person said yes, now we hope that the next person says yes, then the next person says that, and if any point on that ladder someone moves from ITV to BBC, all of a sudden Lucas Book doesn't get made into a TV program anymore, because there's a new head of ITV, and they don't want that kind of book anymore. They want something different, and you go, oh, that's that done. So yeah, every time, look, there's still a lot of interest. There's still lots of meetings and stuff like that all the time. I feel like this is the first book which I can actually see being made for screen, and it being a lot easier to kind of sell than the last few have been. But the series that I just mentioned, the Tony Schumacher one, kind of led to a lot of people talking about Liverpool's set series again. So I've got my fingers crossed that something may come of that. But like the six, which is, if I was honest, probably my favourites up until now of all my books, that was the one that I think would work great as like a 6-part Netflix series. So I've always got my fingers crossed that happens, and you never know. Hopefully, that might do.
Because I think some authors vary, don't they, on how they feel about sort of their books being adapted. I talked to Ben Aranovich a while ago, and he said he deliberately wrote his to be really hard to adapt.
That sounds like a very Ben thing to say.
Yeah, he's like, wrote it so it'd be really expensive.
Yeah, I'm never surprised by, but that's a Ben Aranovich kind of thing to say. He's a great guy. I think it's right. I mean, like I'm very precious about the first 4 books. There was an actor who got in touch with me about playing Murphy, and it was a Scouse actor who I think is brilliant, absolutely superb. Not Stephen Graham. It's not Stephen Graham, but it's someone who's about the same size as him. Now in the books, Murphy's 6'4". This guy was about 5'4", and I was like, so like when that was kind of like going along and stuff like that, there was that kind of reticence within me. It was like, that's going to look a bit strange, and I don't know about that, And all I could think of was like the Reacher thing. Tom Cruise playing Reacher. I remember doing an event with Lee. This is going back years and years, where one of the first questions that was asked was about what do you think about Tom Cruise playing Reacher, and if having to answer that, and then the next question's about that as well, and then the next question, and then the next question, and I think, I don't know if I could deal with that. So yeah, I was a bit precious over that, but it's such a different medium, television to books. When scripts have been written of my books and I've read them, I've always read them with the eye of, this isn't my book, really. I've handed over all control to people who know how to write these scripts. I don't know how to do it, and I'm not pretending that I do, so I'm not going to try and get involved. So when they do things that are different and things like that, I just hold my hands and go, if you think that's what works, that's what works. But for me, it's more about just experiencing that kind of like an adaptation of what I've created, of that what was in my imagination a few years earlier is now there on the screen. And the people who I've spoke to, other writers who have had their work turned into TV or film, that's kind of what they've always mentioned, is that these characters just existed in my head, and at some point in time they didn't exist at all. I thought about them, they came to life, and now they're there on the screen and there's an actor playing them. I'm certain that S.J. Watson, when he was writing Before I Go to Sleep, did not imagine that Nicole Kidman would be playing her, and then all of a sudden there she is. It's like, that is an amazing experience, because I think it's just a fun thing. That's another fun thing that would be great to experience. So now I'm not too precious. The height thing was an issue.
I don't know how tall Reacher is, but he's meant to be ridiculously tall, isn't he? And Tom Cruise,
I think he's about 6'8". I think I can't remember. I think he's like 6'7" or something stupid like that. He's way over 6 foot. And Tom Cruise is he's a little fella. He's about 5'2", I think, or something stupid like that. But is my secret. I loved those films. I thought they were great. I didn't really care that Tom Cruise wasn't that big, but I know a lot of people who couldn't even read Reacher after watching those films, because it ruined them so much for them. I wasn't one of those people. I just thought it was good.
I think it depends on how well they're acted, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a massive part of it. There are people who have had the series made who, where the lead character, bears so little relation to what they were thinking in their head that they find it really difficult to kind of move past that. But a great actor can overcome any of those things. If Stephen Graham turned around to me tomorrow and said, I want to play Murphy, I'd say, no problem at all. Do you need a hand, with anything? No, it's fine. Can I just watch you? Because Stephen Graham is one of my favourite actors of all time. It doesn't matter to me that he's a foot smaller than Murphy. I would just go like, is there anyone else you want to play as well? You can play all the characters. You can play the whole thing. I don't care. Just the idea of like, that they're involved is great. It's just fantastic. I just love that kind. I'd love that, but Stephen Graham's very busy.
We've got 3 minutes left.
All right, okay. That's. Can you tell I don't talk to people very often?
Do you wanna finish us off with a recap about your newest book? Tell people where to buy it. Show us the cover if you've got it.
Yes, I can show you the cover of the book. Can I? I should keep there. It is. That's it there. Oh, spooky house, big light. Ooh. This is out now, and it's available in all good bookshops. And Mark Billingham says, grips from the first page to the last, a UK thriller writer that gives Linwood Barclay and Harlan Coben a run for their money. And that cost me 20 quid for him to say that. I think that was money well spent. And it's a thriller, it's an action thriller that you won't be able to put down, about a very ordinary guy in an extraordinary situation. It's got heart, it's got emotion, and I really, really hope that you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed writing it.
That was a marvelous description again. See, it sounds like practice.
I'm winging it this whole, the last 10 years. That's what's going to be on my gravestone, is you just winged it.
You've been absolutely amazing to chat to.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this. It was great. Thank you so much for having me. And I love the group. So, I'm a lurker. I get a lot of recommendations from this group. So I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Right, you're more than welcome. And you're more than welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.